Good afternoon, everyone. It is 5:30 and I'm seeing about 12 persons on. I think that perhaps we could wait for at least 5 minutes more to see if we have, a few more persons. So we will begin promptly at 5:35. Thank you. Good evening again to those who were here earlier. We did say we would begin at 5:35 just to allow for a few more persons to join us. And that did happen. So thanks again for joining us. For those who have joined us shortly, we are now at 26 persons, and that's an excellent number to start with. Welcome to this, our first professional development seminar for the academic year 2021-2022. 2020-2021 seemed like it was just yesterday. It's almost like a blur. But here we are again at the start of another academic year 2021-2022, and we are so happy to have you back with us. This afternoon, we are joined for the session titled Getting It Right, Abstract Writing and Conference Presentations. And so we will share a little bit later the lineup and how we will proceed for the development session content specifically. Before we go any further, because we are an organization that is spiritually grounded, we're going to open up with a word of prayer. So I invite you to let us pray briefly. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for bringing us here together again to share, to learn, and to network. We pray that as we have our session, that you will guard and guide us, and that you will grant wisdom and help us to have a wonderful time learning together. Guard and guide the presenters, each one who will speak, who will lead a session. Guard and guide those who have come to participate and those who are looking forward to just an opportunity for empowerment. Cover us, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. So again, welcome to AGRE's first professional development seminar for the academic year 2021-2022. Before we go to this session itself, we know that we may be having some persons who are joining us for the first time. And so we would really like to share with those persons specifically a little bit about AGRE. We would also like to share with those persons who, forgot perhaps, how AGRE operates since you took a little break over the holiday and may have forgotten how we are and what we do. I'm going to share just briefly with you some of the things that we have accomplished in the last academic year, as well as some of the things that we are about. So I have a little slideshow that I will share with you. So here we go with another welcome to the Association of Graduate Researchers in Education. This association was established in 2006, but then became a brand in 2016. And what that means, since 2016, we have been re-energized. We have received, new energies. We have a fabulous, dedicated team that is supporting us throughout this academic year. And we have also had some excellent leaders before us. So we operate from outside of the School of Education at the University of the West Indies, Mona. Our focus is largely on education research. So we will have presentations from time to time, but these are all centered on education research. And that is because we see ourselves as becoming the leading graduate association for research. How do we plan to do this? We really want to do this through networking with other persons who are conducting education research, persons who are located within Jamaica, regionally, and in the wider world. Our focus is on conference presentations, publications, and publications in scholarly productions, but also publications that you may consider to be opinion pieces. But at the center of this would be research. I should say that when we started out largely catering to persons who would have completed a graduate degree within the School of Education. But since we have evolved since 2016 to include those who are current graduate students pursuing either master's, MPhil, PhD programs, EdD, whatever the program, whatever the graduate program is within the School of Education, as well as outside of the School of Education. So essentially we have expanded our membership. We have persons now with us who are working in the Ministry of Education, persons who are attending universities overseas, persons who are in non-governmental organizations. So essentially, if you're here for the first time, once you're interested in education research, AGRE welcomes you. We have a team of leaders for AGRE for this academic year. This team has been leading essentially for the past 2 years. We had a new team member joining us, and that's Mr. Miguel Eisen. So more of you have become familiar with Mr. Eisen. Of course, you would have seen Mr. Karif Clark and Miss Ruth and Edwards through their different moments of postings and all the social media websites. So Karif is our president and Ruthann is our vice president. And we have two excellent support in the form of Denise Lloyd and Sharika Hunter, who serve us in the capacity of secretary and assistant secretary, respectively. We also have a fabulous team of public relations officer, Mrs. Shanique Walker-Carty and Mrs. Elsa Colliard-Bernard. Elsa, I am so sorry for messing up your name, Colliard-Burton. And these two have been with us for a very long time in the association, serving outside of this capacity, but currently they both serve as publications officer. We have with us Miss Georgette Green, who serves as treasurer. And once you see that word treasurer, you start to think about money, right? And so we really do not have much money, but we are looking to increase our membership and hopefully to have some funding opportunities through your support as well. We also have Mrs. Thomas Phillips, who has served us in several capacities in the association, but now serves us as assistant treasurer. So what is it that you will get from AGRE as you join us or become a member? We try to engage our membership through weekly motivational Mondays and commendation Tuesdays. And the motivational Mondays are really for inspiration, while the commendation Tuesdays, they serve as inspiration, yes, but that is where we celebrate the work that our membership, our members are doing through research. Of course, we have our quarterly professional development sessions, and this is one such that you have come to join us for this afternoon. We try to produce a newsletter quarterly. Sometimes we may not get it on the date, right? But we have these quarterly newsletters that really capture what we have been doing, and they also capture what our members have been doing. And of course, you would have seen and heard about our conference. We had one in 2019, and we're going to be having another one this year. And I'll share briefly on that in just a little bit. One of the things that we are keen on, we see ourselves as helping persons to develop. So we don't necessarily expect all our persons to come ready with the skills, but if you don't have the skills, we welcome you. If you have the research skills, we welcome you. There's an opportunity for you to serve. So we offer mentorship. And so we see ourselves as a capacity building organization as it relates to conducting and publishing research. And we do this in different ways. We may have one-to-one mentorship depending on what members are working on, and they reach out to us to say they would like support on this, or we will reach out to members to say, hey, we have this opportunity. Would you like to be a part of it? So look out for that. We are big on networking with fellow researchers. So we also liaise with associations that are in other institutions. And I know we have one such grouping from the University of Technology that is always joining us. And I'm sure we have other groupings as well. So join us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course, WhatsApp. We have a very active WhatsApp group. If you would like to reach out to us, if there's a query you have, if you would like to become a member and you have not yet seen the membership form, you can just simply email us at agrejamaica@gmail.com and we will definitely get in touch with you. So what are some of the things that we have accomplished so far? We have been publishing in research journals, we have been doing blurbs on websites, and we have been publishing in newspaper articles. We have persons who have presented at conferences locally, regionally, and internationally, and we are so proud of them. And we also have members who have conducted professional development sessions. I'd like to share with you just briefly some of the accomplishments since academic year 2020-2021 for those who may have missed some of those. So we looked at a session where we focused on pre, during, and post-COVID-19, researching, looking at social emotional learning in Jamaica. And we thought that that was important given the pandemic and all that, you know, has been happening with people. We have also conducted professional development focusing on the relevance of researching during this period of remote learning. And we had some of our members who shared their research during that time. We had a conversation that I think has touched the lives of so many of our members and those who are not members, where we spoke about let's talk, what makes us human. And that was so interesting. And that led us to look at non-traditional research methodologies. So following that, we had a session looking at what counts as research coming out of the previous conversation, exploring non-traditional research methodologies. So I just want to highlight, you know, some of our members who have published. And we know that publishing in peer-reviewed journals is not an easy undertaking. So I really want to big up Elsa, Denise, George, Kerif for publishing in, you know, international journals and also in local journals. We have Travis Morgan from the last academic year who did a newspaper article, and we also have Vestina Oates who published a book. So our members are blazing a trail. And so this afternoon, as we share, the intention is to get more of you to join that, you know, trail that we are on towards publication. As it relates to conference presentations in the last academic year, we had our Vice President Ruth Ann Edwards presenting at conference, our Secretary Sharika Hunter, one of our PROs, Shanique Walker-Carty, and our other PRO, Elsa, you know, presenting at conferences. And these were not just local conferences, these were also international conferences. So here we are for the biggie. So come November 24, 2021, AGRE will be hosting its second conference under the theme, Reimagining Research Responsibilities, Quality Education, and the Use of Research During Abnormal Times. We have several of our members who have submitted their abstracts and have got their abstracts, you know, accepted for presentation. If you look at the lineup, you will see that we have both international scholars, academics who are, you know, well known in the area of research, as well as our local scholars. And this is not just limited to persons who are within the School of Education. You will see that we have persons from outside of the School of Education. And so we ask you to join us. This flyer will be circulating shortly. You would have seen the call for papers, you would have seen our cost, but now we will be sharing the flyer to tell you how to register and how to become involved in the conference on November 24 from 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. If you can't join us for the entire day, at least try and join us, for part of the day. So again, connect with us on the different social media sites. So yes, you didn't come here just to hear me talk about AGRE and all that AGRE is doing. We have a wonderful lineup for you for this professional development session. We have some presenters who are very good at writing abstracts and making conference presentations. And part of this development is to support you as you seek opportunities for publishing your work and presenting your work. The conference presentation highlight will be good for those who are planning to make their presentations at the AGRE conference. So just a little bit about each presenter before we get into the breakout rooms. We have Karif Clark, our president, and Karif has been an educator for 11 years and has been serving the AGRE in the capacity of president since 2018. He's a published researcher and he has experiences presenting at research conferences. He's an independent research consultant as well, so you can reach out to him. He's currently pursuing his MPhil PhD in the area of teacher education with a focus on ESD. We also have with us Tamara Scott McFarlane. You would have seen her on the flyer too. She's an MPhil PhD student in teacher education, currently a senior lecturer at Excelsior Community College, and she has responsibility as a research editor, and her area of specialization is language and communication. We have Mr. Miguel Eisen, who is a PhD student and assistant lecturer in the School of Education. And his research interests include student engagement in science classes, chemistry education, STEM education, and environmental education. Not to be left out at all, we have Miss Ruth Ann Edwards, who is an educator who holds a B.Ed and a teaching diploma in human ecology and a Master of Arts degree in teacher education and teacher development. She refers to herself as being passionate about teacher leadership, teacher education, teacher development, and Ruth Ann, as you would have seen, currently serves in the capacity of vice president. So without any further ado, what we will do is have you participate in different rooms so that we can have conversations that are more, intimate and targeted. So we have 45 of you at this time, and we're going to ask you to join one of the rooms. So at this point, we're going to ask you to get into breakout rooms. You can either join, in room 1 or room 2. I think the host will perhaps assign you randomly. So if you're assigned to a room, we ask you to remain in that room until we end this session. We will announce when we're ending the breakout room aspect of it. But in the breakout room, you will be engaged in looking at what's an abstract and what are the components of a good abstract. You will also be engaged in looking at how to make conference presentations. What are the key elements of a good conference presentation? And of course, you have the opportunity to raise your own questions. So each room has 2 facilitators who will take you through the seminar activities. So at this time, we break for the breakout room, and I wish you all the best as you engage. I will be moving from room to room just to see how we're getting on and to add my own 2 cents as we go throughout.
Okay, I think we have a little mix up here. Right, Karif?
Hi, yes, Mr. Eisen. Good afternoon, colleagues. So, Mr. Eisen, you'll move to room 1.
Yeah, man. I just have to leave the room and see if I can.
Good afternoon again, colleagues. We will begin shortly. Okay. Okay, colleagues, could you confirm that you're hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
I'm hearing you.
Okay, great. All right, so welcome to our session as Dr. Wolf has extended that invitation and welcomes you. I will be your first facilitator this afternoon. The intention is to have a very interactive session. As you would see on the flyer, it is supposed to be a workshop, and so we crave your participation throughout. I will be taking you through abstract writing, and then I will hand over to Ruth Ann, who will guide you through the conference presentations. There are two primary things that I would like us to focus on this afternoon, and one of those two would be looking at some guidelines that we think are important to writing abstracts, and then we will be evaluating abstracts. So we will be looking at some practical situations where abstracts are concerned. I hope too that you are able to navigate with me through a Google form that I will share in the chat shortly as a means of engagement. Okay, and so when we talk about an abstract, most of you are familiar with, if not all, you're familiar with abstracts because you have seen them or you would have had to produce an abstract for yourself. For a paper, which is an assignment or a conference presentation or for publication in a journal. And so you do have an experience with abstracts. However, we want to be very targeted in our support to you. So we're looking at an abstract as something that is succinct and it's a representation of your study or your proposal. And why we have study or proposal, it means that your abstract can represent a completed study or it's an abstract representing a proposal. So for example, if you're submitting to a conference, you see a call for paper, it means therefore that you have some time to put together your abstract and then to collect data. And so your abstract would reflect that it is a proposal pretty much. And so you will write in the future tense some aspects of your abstract. Generally, abstracts would take about 250 words to 300. The call for papers, if it's a conference or the journal publication, will indicate to you the word limit for your abstracts. Typically, it does not go beyond one paragraph either, which is approximately 10% of your paper. There are some key areas that your abstracts should and must include. One of those areas would be your research topic or the issue that you're seeking to address in your study or that you would have addressed. And it is also good to ensure that you have provided a context for your study. The research abstract should also focus on or give an idea as to the purpose of your research paper or your study and or the questions. Based on your writing style, you may include your questions or you may state them as statements in your abstract. So your writing style will depend, or that section will depend on your writing style. It is also good to include your participants in your study so that the readers of your abstracts will be able to know who participated in the study. The design and methods are also important, and so we encourage you to include these aspects in your abstract writing. And if you read, for example, Creswell, he will tell you that he gives basically an outline or a template that is pretty easy, I find, in terms of crafting your purpose statement, talking about your methodology, etc. We encourage you also to include the type of data analysis or how you went about analyzing your data, or if you're writing a proposed abstract, how you will go about analyzing your data. And the two last things would typically include your results or findings or arguments, depending on the type of paper it is. And then we encourage you to ensure that you have your conclusions and implications. We also encourage you to include your keywords. You are familiar with keywords. Keywords are specific to your study. And so to ensure that your readers from the onset of taking up your study or accessing your study, it is clear to them what your key terms are for your research paper. If you're submitting an assignment, typically your abstract will be on a page by itself. However, for some journal publications, you will see the abstract on the cover page as well as the introduction, depending on the journal that you're using, or the abstract itself will be on one page in addition to the author's details, the name of the journal, and the information related to your referencing for the article. Also, we encourage you to pay attention to the tenses that you use. And so you will see abstracts using the present, the perfect, and the future tense. And these will vary depending on the study that you're doing or the point at which you are for your study. And so, for example, if you look at the perfect tense, you would say that, which is what we typically call the past tense, but you would say that data was collected or data were collected via questionnaire, etc. If you're looking at a proposal for an abstract, you will say data will be collected using focus group interviews, etc. So your tense will be an important area to focus on. We encourage you to avoid a few things, which would be, do not confuse your abstract with your introduction. Your abstract is not your introduction to your paper, so please ensure that you are able to separate those. Do not overuse references in your abstract too, but we do encourage you to create an abstract or to craft an abstract where you are pointing to key references or citations that would have influenced your study or that would have led to you carrying out the study. And we encourage you not to repeat the title of your paper because the title would have already been indicated. So to save on words, you do not repeat the title of your paper. Let us look at the rubric that was used to review our abstracts for the conference. Typically, once you submit an abstract, it is going to be matched against a set of criteria. And a simple one that we would have adopted here at AGRE would have looked at the relevance of the research abstract to the conference theme or the strands. If you're submitting a journal or to a journal, we encourage you to align your study to individual journals because journals are discipline specific. So if, for example, you want to do or publish a qualitative research study, then you would align that to, for example, the qualitative report in the United States as a research journal. If you want to publish a mixed method study, you want to look for a journal that is mixed methods based. So you want to ensure that you're aligning your abstract and your paper to the respective conference or journal. Your abstract should include, as we stated earlier, the problem statement, the objectives or the research questions, the sample, which would be your participants or respondents, depending on the type of research that you're doing, the methods used, and the purpose of the presentation. Rutan will cover that, and the main findings or the purpose of your research. We also encourage you to review your abstract to ensure that the language is on point, where it is clear, cohesive, and logical. And we encourage you to adhere to a word limit. And so as you go throughout your journey as researchers, look to ensure that you're meeting these criteria set by the conference organizers or the journals. And so if you use this rubric or this instrument, then once you read an abstract, you can tick off to say, yes, this is present, no, it is not, or not indicated. And we will be doing an activity throughout the presentation as it relates to evaluating abstracts. Any questions so far? Okay, Mr. Lewis, I'm seeing your question. Yes, so the presentations will be shared afterwards as well as the recording. Rohan, you may go ahead.
Arif, I heard you mention earlier the limited use of reference, and you can correct me in the abstract. I don't know how widely, how wide enough you've seen that, because I know there's some conventional writing styles, for example, or manuals, for example, and I think APA is one of them that actually discourages the use of the reference in the abstract. So I'm not so sure how wide you've seen that or others have seen that. Certainly, I suggest to people not to put it in the abstract, but I'm not saying it shouldn't. I just ask how widely, publicized that you've seen that,
No problem. In fact, I have seen references in abstracts and I've seen abstracts without references. And I have used references in abstracts and I have written abstracts without references. So I've seen both. We do have some researchers though who will encourage us that if we're going to use abstract, you should limit to not go beyond 2. And some of the examples that we will be looking at in this session will explore some of these things.
Okay, cool.
So it depends on the point that you're making, the point that you're trying to make as a researcher.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay. All right, no problem. All right. So in the chat,
there's something else that
sure.
you corrected earlier, which probably the person's on this call. Because some of the times there's some words, for example, that's like data. And sometimes you write, for example, and we say data was, because we look at it in the singular form, but it really is data were. So I'm glad you mentioned it just now as you're talking.
Yes, when I learned research, initially I learned data were because datum is the singular, but I've seen widely where a lot of researchers have used data in the singular form, or to say data was, but the actual correct thing to say is data were. So thanks for highlighting that, Rohan.
It depends on the style guide too, because I know APA discourages data was.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, no problem. Thank you. All right, so if we proceed, we'll look at some examples and we will be going to sample 1. So on your screen, we will be looking at this paper. The title of this paper is Transitioning to Online Teaching, Learning and Assessment in the COVID-19 Era, Understanding Student and Faculty Perspectives. And the citation is there for this paper. I will allow for you a few minutes to read through the abstract, and then we will discuss the ideas presented and to evaluate the abstract. All right. The link in the chat will also provide you with the rubric that we looked at earlier, or the instrument that we looked at earlier. So you can indicate, once you select sample one, you indicate, for example, if you're seeing an alignment with the conference or the journal. For this one, I will caution you, however, that you can decide if, for example, if it were to be submitted to a journal, what the journal would look like or what the journal would represent. And then the other areas in terms of participants, the design or the methods, the recommendations, etc. So you can indicate those via the Google form. Okay, so as was said, we want this session to be as interactive as possible and for individuals to participate as much as possible. And so what I'll do, I'll just ask for a volunteer to read through the abstract aloud, and then we'll start commenting on the abstract. So may I have a volunteer, please? Or should I call on someone?
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
I'll go ahead.
Okay, you may go ahead.
So a greater majority of teaching, learning, and assessment in higher education in the Caribbean is premised on the traditional delivery of face-to-face TLA. In March 2020, the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus a pandemic, and many Caribbean educators transitioned quickly to online TLA. In light of this transition, the current study examines the challenges, benefits, opportunities, and lessons learned as a result of the sudden transition from face-to-face to online modes of TLA at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. A qualitative phenomenological approach was adopted, and data collected from a cohort of postgraduate criminology and criminal justice students, just 20, and their lecturers, 5, who transitioned from face-to-face to online TLA during semester 2 of academic year 2019 to 2020. The thematic analysis of the data emanating from the semi-structured interviews with students and lecturers indicated a multiplicity of challenges, benefits, new opportunities, and lessons learned. The keywords here for this abstract are information technology, digital education, TLA, COVID-19, higher education, the University of the West Indies.
Thank you so very much, Rohan, for reading. Now, may I have some of your thoughts about this abstract?
So can I go ahead?
Okay, you may go ahead, and I see Jadio's mic was unmuted. So Rohan, you may go ahead, and then Jadio.
All right, so one of the things I realized there isn't any, the conclusion section is missing. So that's one observation. But then I realized the defined coronaviruses up the top there. And then somewhere down the bottom, they actually, in the keywords, they indicate COVID-19 as the keyword. I'm not sure if that is a major issue, but I think following though, there are some things. I realized that the very first sentence there kind of gives a sense of what's the problem. And there is, to me, it speaks about the design. It also speaks about the participants. So lecturers and students give specificity as to what type of students, postgraduate in criminology and justice, criminal justice. It speaks about data collection strategy, which is interviews. It probably doesn't say anything though about how they, well, it's about the analysis as well. Right.
Okay, all right. Thank you so very much, Rohan. Jadio and Adlai.
Our good evening, colleagues. Good evening.
Jadio.
Commendations on what you have been doing so far. I think Mr. Makala has mentioned most of what I was going to speak about, but I realized I was following along on the Google form and trying to make an assessment of the abstract based on the different indicators that you have here. As I said before, Ron would have mentioned, you know, and highlighted those elements that you spoke about. On the Google form though, you spoke or asked if the abstract had the objectives and the research questions and that sort of stuff. I think this question is too broad. The question that you ask on the Google form, it's very broad to have an answer as yes or no, because there might be an element that is missing. For example, the research question. You're following what I'm saying? So I can't say yes, I can't say no, because of some things are there while some things are not there. I think that the language though is it's cohesive, it's logical, it's clear. And yeah, I think Ron has said most of what I would have mentioned.
Okay, thank you, Jadio. Adlai?
Let me greet everyone on this platform. I hope you're having I hope that all are having a wonderful time as I am at this point. But I would just concur with Mr. Dennis, was it, that spoke before me? I was having that difficulty separating the different criteria based on the Google form. I was actually using it to evaluate the abstract. So I could not select a no because I found in parts some things were just too wide. And then I couldn't say no because other aspects were clear. So that was the difficulty that I was having. So I'm really agreeing with my colleague that spoke just now.
Okay, thank you very much. Any final comments before I make a comment about this?
Yes, Kareem. Kareem.
Okay,
so,
sure.
So the methodology, just looking back, I think the methodology could have been more could have gone into the methodology, I think. Because usually in the paper itself, you know, there is a lot that has said about the methodology for the reader to be able to go back and kind of replicate. So I think, well, I'm not sure about the actual number of words used here, but I'm not sure that just looking at, I'm sure that the established number would have been adequately used up. So I think, you know, that methodology section probably could have a little bit more depth.
Okay, all right. So thank you so very much, colleagues, for those comments. I'm seeing where Marilyn is also contributing to the discussion. She's saying mention of implications and recommendations could have been made. Thank you so very much, colleagues, for your observation. And so based on what we would have covered earlier, what we covered earlier, you do see that there is merit in terms of you can evaluate some abstracts and see where some of the gaps are. If we're to take a closer look at this abstract, we would be able to identify some things clearly. So if we look at the first two sentences, I think we would agree that there is an attempt to address the concern or to provide context for the study, or to indicate what the research paper is about. The purpose, or another sentence, I believe this, these sentences come after, immediately after, provided you with the purpose of the study, or to situate the purpose of the study, looking at the challenges, benefits, and opportunities, lessons learned, etc. And it also would have indicated the research site, which would have been UWI St. Augustine campus. There's a section as well that spoke to the research methodology and the participants. And if you were to read the study, of course, there would be greater detail about the participants, their background. But from this abstract, I think you, based on your suggestions or your comments, you're able to identify some critical things. As Rohan said, there are ways in which you can reword to better express ideas or the methodology of your abstract. It spoke about some data analysis in terms of a thematic analysis. And so I want to encourage you to look at how you write, because some of these words will automatically indicate that your study is a qualitative paper or it's a quantitative or mixed method. And from some of the titles too of the studies, you should be able to understand or to get an idea of what the research paradigm is. And this abstract did include the keywords, but as Ron indicated, there was a disconnect with what was basically defined or contextualized and the keyword for this study. Let us look at a second one, selective education in Guyana, comparing the psychosocial well-being of students across schools. Okay, so I'll give you a couple seconds to peruse on your own, and then I will ask someone again to read for us. All right, may I have a reader, please? Or can I just call on someone?
I'll go.
Okay, Ruthann, thank you.
Selective education research has demonstrated that students are aware of the low status of being allocated to a low ability school. Recent data in Guyana has shown that low ability school attendance is associated with low rates of student attendance, retention, and graduation. This study aims to understand the effects of ability grouping on students by comparing the psychosocial well-being of students from different ability schools. Data was collected from a sample of 193 adolescents, 70 males, and 123 females, aged 13 to 18, from 4 secondary schools. Representing the 4 school ability rankings, it was hypothesized that students' psychosocial well-being would be significantly lower in low ability schools compared to high ability schools. Unexpectedly, The results indicated that the highest ability school had significantly lower psychosocial well-being than the other lower ability schools. The results may be potentially explained by the theory of big fish, little pond effect. However, confirmation in future research is warranted.
Thank you so very much, Ruthann. And so I will invite you once again, colleagues, to share your ideas about this abstract. I would love to hear from other members of the room. I am seeing that we're 21 in total. I'm on 2 devices, so we're 19. There are 19 of you who can share at least one thing about this abstract and what in the abstract you would use to justify your point. Camille, you may go ahead.
Hello, good night, everyone. The first thing that jumped out at me, I don't know about anybody else, is that I think the methodology could be developed a little bit more. It doesn't say if it's qualitative, quantitative, you know, what type of qualitative study it is. Like the previous abstract said that it was a phenomenological one. So that's what kind of jumped out at me.
All right, thank you for that, Camille. Any other observations? Rohan, you may go ahead.
Right. So I concur with the methodology section there. There's just one thing, well, there's several things, but there's one thing I need to point out where, so data was here, that's one thing. Just in that same sentence where 193 adolescents, once you indicate 70 males, in fact, the larger number should tell. So all this writer needed to say was 123 were females. And the reader would then pick up that the rest was male. Because with writing your abstract, you need to be very sharp. So you have to be, I oftentimes like to say, a wordsmith in writing the abstract. So, you know, you have to make sure that each word matters and you're not replicating or adding anything that will increase your word count. So if I were writing, I would only put in bracket 123 female and that would be it.
Okay, thank you, Rohan. Any other observations from this abstract?
The other one other thing, Karim, okay. I'm not sure I like the keywords, all the keywords, and I think some of them could better be under the definition of terms section in the paper.
Okay.
In the full paper. So I suspect they're looking at the number of times the words were represented in the paper, but also if I were to do a search, an internet search, for example, I probably wouldn't be searching for some of these terms.
All right, thank you for those, Rohan. And we will share the journals for these articles in the PowerPoint afterwards. All right, thank you. At least one other observation before I comment. Any takers?
I will.
Jacqueline?
Good evening.
Okay.
Hi,
Jacqueline. Yes, we are.
Yes, my connection. Yes, okay, good. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm not sure. I'm looking here. I haven't seen how the data was collected, what method was used, and also how it was analyzed. Nothing on that. That's it from me.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Jacqueline, for those observations. So based on Jacqueline's comment and Camille, I will share some things with you, and I will also admit to my limitations in this regard, but I think I have an understanding of quantitative research, a basic understanding and appreciation for quantitative research. So how you could differentiate this paper from a qualitative and a quantitative paper is that generally in qualitative papers, we do not, or studies, we wouldn't be identifying or using hypotheses and be using so many samples, well, participants in our study, unless, for example, we're doing like a survey. But as Jacqueline said, the study here was not clear in terms of how data were collected. But if you read through the paper, you will see that it is a quantitative paper. It did indicate implications and suggesting that the study or more would need to be done to ascertain greater details or to draw concrete conclusions in this area. Rohan did indicate or point out that the keywords, some of them were questionable, but there are some which of course would be specific to this study. In terms of the number of participants, well, samples, respondents, I'm assuming, again, because this is not clear, I think you can, as Rohan suggested, that you want to use your words wisely. In the beginning, we talked about being very succinct in your writing. And so you can use your own writing style to explain your sample or your respondents in your study. But another thing that was important, I believe, is that the research site was also indicated here. So that's a positive. Adlai?
Please permit me, I just need some clarity here.
Sure.
All right, I don't want to break a chain of thought, but all right, I'm having a little difficulty. I've heard participants speaking to the methodology.
Mm-hmm.
It's bothering me and I don't want to leave this session not understanding. My area that I'm looking at currently, I'm doing quantitative studies. And when I read the abstract, right there and then, some things jumped out at me in terms of methodology. I see translation of data between persons who go to low ability and high other ability schools and their attendance, and I see that sort of data pooling together to give you your conclusion, yeah, and to look at the hypothesis and so on. I didn't have much of a problem with the method explained. Could you just go back a little bit there to say what would have been the best practice in this regard? Because I think it was okay from my perspective. So I just want a better understanding.
You want a better understanding of the methodology?
Yeah, what should have been done differently? Because probably I would have done it like this. I'm not sure.
Okay, so I think if we were to look at Jacqueline's observation, Jacqueline is saying that the method of data collection was not indicated. I don't think that the authors have described or identified the research design clearly, because we do have several designs falling under quantitative research. And if there's anyone who is good at quantitative, I welcome the discussion or the discourse on the matter. But again, by using the word hypothesize and so on, you are leaning towards a quantitative study. The number of persons in your study will also represent or give an indication as to the type of study it is. But it is not clear from my standpoint, and I guess from others, how the design of the study and how data were collected.
So just a follow-up, Sir Clark.
Yes.
Understand the effects of, to me, that was the clear indication of the direction of this study.
Mm-hmm. But it has not stated the design of the study. There is no study design here.
All right, gotcha.
All right, like the first one, it looked at a qualitative paper, but it looked at it from a phenom perspective, right? It could be a qualitative looking at a narrative inquiry. It could be a qualitative looking at it from, and forgive me if I'm using a lot of qualitative terms, but from an ethnographic perspective. But I know that in quantitative, you do have different designs that you could use to approach the study, and that is not clear. And I think that is what is even causing this conversation right now, because it is not clear. So the encouragement, therefore, is to be very clear about your research design so as to not have these questions coming up. Kadia in the chat is
Sorry,
suggestion. Yes.
may I just clarify what I meant by method of collection? Mainly
Okay.
the instruments used. So the other abstract mentioned semi-structured interviews were used to collect the data. So the instruments used to collect this data, that was not mentioned.
Yes.
And it's important to indicate what instruments were used, right? So whether they use survey, we cannot imply, or it shouldn't be us trying to figure out from the abstract what instruments were used. So that is what I meant by that.
Agreed. Totally agreed.
Thank you.
All right. Clear, Adlai? Yes.
Karif.
Rohan? Okay, go ahead.
If I may just add, so the use of the word, let me see if I'm finding it back. I think just scroll down, hold on. Effect, or understand the effects. It would suggest to me, because you have at least three basic quantitative designs. It's not descriptive, it's not relational or correlational. It would suggest it's more causal comparative, and on the causal side, because of the use of the word effect, I think I haven't counted the numbers, but for example, the writer could actually indicate the sampling technique that was used to arrive at the sample size, what type of, so they spoke about the number in terms of the sample, but also the data analysis strategy. So I see somebody, for example, putting in a chat ANOVA and ANCOVA and stuff, regression. The method of analyzing the data could actually be expounded. So this is really towards the question of clarity that other gentleman there is asking about. Usually, when you illuminate aspects of the methodology, to include the methods and the sampling design and stuff, people can get a better sense of how it was done, and also clear up some of the thoughts in the head. So seeing the word effect for me is more a causal comparative, which again, looking at the title, it says comparing, and I'm thinking there may be some differences that are being compared. So again, I would probably be in agreement with using things like ANOVAs and stuff, because it would suggest to me that you're looking at differences.
All right, thank you so very much, colleagues, for your contributions. We have about 5 minutes in for this session, and so we will go to another abstract to review and to comment on. This abstract looks at the importance of effective business governance in higher education institutions, and I will display the abstract, and I'll just ask a reader at this time, so as to save on time, or to maximize rather on time, to go through for us. May I have a reader, please?
I'll go.
Okay, thank you.
The role of effective business governance in higher education institutions is critical to their success. However, not all institutions operate by a business governance plan. Given the influx of international competition within the Jamaican higher education industry, effective business governance plans for all higher education institutions will be an effective tool for promoting better business standards, regulations, and transparency. The purpose of this paper is to engage readers in intellectual discourse on the importance of effective business governance and higher education institutions. The discussion starts with an overview of the college, an examination of the need for effective governance, as well as developing the dimensions of a comprehensive and effective governance program. There will also be a focus on the global influence of the college and considerations for judicious resolutions and a suggested plan for implementation and evaluation of the governance program.
Thank you so very much, Marilyn. What are your initial thoughts on this abstract?
I'm trying to figure out if this is a proposal rather than that's something that has been carried out. And I'm still trying to figure out where data collection is going to happen, or if it's just I need time to process this a little bit more.
No problem, no problem. Thank you, Marilyn. Any other observations? I've not heard from a number of other persons in the room. Please go ahead and share your observations because your perspective may differ from those perspectives shared already. Or we would just like to hear from you how you've been processing this information. T. Williams, would you like to comment? No, any other observations from this article or this abstract rather? Okay, you may go ahead, Rohan.
Right, so Karim, well, if it's an abstract, it's a badly written one, and if it's a summary, it's a badly written one. So in the first sentence there, I realized that punctuation error. But even I think, again, and I mentioned about being succinct because the reader uses all of those words come right down to transparency. Some of that I don't think is all that necessary. And the purpose to me, I'm not necessarily understanding whether or not it's, well, obviously using the word engage readers in intellectual discourse, but how do you do that? What exactly are you going to do? So it's, so even if it's a summary, if it's a summary, a proposal for a piece of work, you still need to highlight some things. For example, what is the design that you're going to use, the research methodology, first of all, and then after the methodology, what design are you going to use? What are the methods of the data collection? How are you going to analyze the data? Those sorts of things are missing.
All right, thank you, Rohan. Before I take Adlai, I think T. Williams had raised his or her hand to comment. You may go ahead, and then I will take Adlai.
Good afternoon. You may go ahead. I just logged in a few minutes ago, so I'm not quite sure as to what was happening before.
All right, so while Adlai is gathering his thoughts, so we're reviewing abstracts and we're commenting on the strengths and the weaknesses of abstracts. All right, Adlai, you may go ahead.
If I really learned something this evening from the presentation, I would have heard distinctly that we should not repeat the title, the topic in the abstract, because we're saving, well, we're saving words for important information. And I see distinctly there after the purpose of this paper, word for word, the abstract title was repeated. So correct me if I'm wrong.
All right, thank you for the observation, Adlai. I'll comment afterwards. All right. Any other observations? Marsha, Michael, any observations from you? I think we have some shy persons in this room. Go ahead, Marsha.
Nothing that hasn't been said.
All right, Marsha, thank you. In the chat,
Thank
Marilyn.
you.
Okay, thank you. In the chat, Marilyn is saying, yes, it does come across as a white paper. I needed keywords. So Ruan is saying no keywords have been identified either or listed. Camille, I agree with Marilyn, it seems to be a proposal on a white paper, but several elements are missing. So pretty much, I think, yes, you may go ahead, Michael.
All right, sorry about that. When I look at the language and the tense, it is in the present tense, and that is not accepted. There are several elements. I would suggest this is a proposal, or I use the term white paper, green paper, orange paper, whatever this is. But there are several elements that is missing, and it's not concurrent with what is expected of an abstract. Yes, that's it.
All right, thank you, Michael. So I think generally then we would conclude that this is not necessarily a well-written abstract, and given the gaps that we can identify. Rohan raised up an issue about the punctuation used in the first sentence. Forgive me for that. That was my bad in retyping the abstract. So it should have been a full stop. But there are other punctuation issues that needed to be addressed. From my understanding and my review of this abstract, I would agree with you that it's not a well-written abstract because it does not indicate the type of paper it would want to suggest. I think Marilyn raised it that it's a qualitative paper. It has a purpose statement, but because there is no clear indication of the methodology of this paper, one would question the essence of the paper. I think, though, that we could look at it from the perspective that this writer or this researcher may want to do a conceptual paper, or a paper that does not collect empirical data, but that too has to be very clearly written in the abstract. If it's a conceptual paper where you're pulling on theories and ideas to advance a recommendation or suggestion leading into an actual study. Am I the only one who got that understanding?
That's one way to look at it. But that's a better way to look at it, I would suggest.
Okay.
Well, I wasn't
Yes.
looking at it from that perspective because I am saying if it's a conceptual paper, there would have been a lot more analysts coming out, a lot more concepts coming out in a tighter manner. I'm not seeing anything much there. It's just stuff. I just see some stuff there. Sorry.
Very good, thank you. I see Dr. Ruth, but just before Dr. Ruth, I wanted to believe that this person would lean towards a conceptual paper because there's no indication that data will be collected, empirical data will be collected, and it is looking at discussion. So the discussion talks about, and so I would want to believe that there would be a review of concepts or analyzing of concepts to put together discussion points. Dr. Ruth?
Yes, I'll add a comment and then say to you, need to wrap up for the next one. So the concept, even when we have conceptual abstract, they still need to have the different elements. It's just that the elements take on a different form. So you still need to have your objectives. Some people do have essential questions. You still need to have your statement and your context. You still need to have the purpose. You still need to say how you're analyzing the arguments to inform the position you're taking
or the idea you're sharing. So the components are still essential. It's just that they appear in a different form. And this abstract didn't have any of those as well. Even if you look at the purpose, there's really no purpose in here, given what is stated.
Okay, much appreciated, Dr. Wu. And on that note, I will have to end my presentation. I went 5 minutes over, but I want to thank you, colleagues, for engaging me with this topic, and to also encourage you to continue the discussion afterwards. I now hand over to Ruthann. Ruthann?
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Just give me a quick second. Okay, good evening, colleagues. I trust that you are all doing well and that you're indeed hearing me clearly. Hearing me clearly?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, awesome. So we are a tad bit strapped for time, but nevertheless, we will continue. Now, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to share them in the chat, as I'm hoping to just get through the presentations quickly. And Mr. Clark, just bring to my attention if there are indeed any questions in the chat. All right. So for this second session, we are looking at getting it right conference presentation. And without a doubt, you know, we have gone through the rigors of writing the abstract, especially where Tariq would have explained the various errors or faults that may occur. But when you get to that point of presenting, this is where you are going to be basically condensing everything and trying to present or really all that you have studied or preparing to study perhaps within a 15 to 20 minutes time frame. All right. So I have a picture on screen and I just want for two persons to share their thoughts. What do you think about this picture? Any two? Feel free. Somebody jump in.
Confusion came to mind. That's the first word.
Okay, confusion. Thank you. Anybody else?
Connection.
Connection. Okay, so connection and confusion. All right. So when you're making a presentation for a conference specifically, especially that's what we're referring to at this time, you ought to bear in mind the fact that your audience is most definitely going to be joining via virtual space.
So thank you for that, Valerie. But I just want to use the learning moment. And so, yes.
Could you mute that, please? Thank you. Thanks. All right. So first and foremost, your audience may be saying to themselves, you know, why should I listen to your presentation? But as that individual who's going to be making the presentation, you ought to ask yourself as well, you know, can I keep an individual's attention for about 15 to 20 minutes, especially within the confines of a virtual space? Now, with this image on screen, it is pretty much clear that a lot of things are happening there. And so it's the same if it is that you're presenting for a conference. Your audience is going to be in various rooms, various spaces, and they will indeed interact with other things that are happening around them. And so it is your job to try and keep their attention with whatever it is that you are presenting on. So for this presentation, we are looking at the elements that are of importance when you're making a presentation at a conference, but we're also going to be talking about aesthetics as well as delivery. Now, we're going to start out with the presentation, you know, the elements that must be evident when you come forward to present at a conference. First and foremost, you want to start out by ensuring that you have some sort of cover page. You're setting the tone from square one. Whoever is viewing needs to know what exactly they're going to be involved in for the next couple of minutes. And you want to ensure that whoever is viewing is aware of your name, what sort of affiliation, And of course, this is the first step to ensuring that you're pulling the crowd. Next up is basically what I dub as the introductory section. So you are going to need to establish some sort of ground as it relates to the orientation of the topic you're speaking about. You know, you can't just jump right into the presentation. There may be persons who are clueless as to what exactly this topic has to do with. So you are going to have to make up some sort of ground as it relates to the orientation of the topic, but you would need to speak to the rationale. Now, before I get to the rationale, I just want to make it clear that I tried as best as possible to incorporate info in relation to both qual, quant, and mixed. And so you may see a mixture, all right? So when we talk about the rationale, this is where you're basically saying to your audience, you know, what is this reason that you have for carrying out this research? At the same time, you're saying to yourself, all right, why am I carrying out this study? When you get to the purpose or the objective, this is where you're talking about what is being explored through this presentation. Now, if it is that you're looking at it from a standpoint, from a qualitative, you're talking about aspects of comparing measurable variables. But at the same time, if it's from a qual perspective, we're exploring a central phenomenon, so to say. Now, the other aspect that falls under introduction is the background or the context. This is pretty straightforward, I believe. You're giving information in relation to that same topic that you're about to talk about. And then we introduce here at the last point, significance. Now, when we get to the significance, this is where you're clearly stating who will benefit from this study. If it is that it is a topic that is in relation to education, you need to identify all the stakeholders who will in turn benefit from this particular study. Next up, you ought to have a slide that speaks to your research questions or hypothesis. Now, for those persons who may be sharing a study in relation to in relation to qualitative study or quantitative study, the mixed method, you would definitely have to be sure of which of these formats your paper is going to be taking. Now, coming out of the abstract writing session, it is clear that it must be evidenced there as well. And so you're basically transferring knowledge. If it is that your paper is of a qualitative focus, you are going to need to speak to your research questions. If it is that your paper is of a quantitative nature, there's a mixture there coming into play where you will have research questions, but you'll also have hypothesis evidence. The mixed methods, of course, would capture both aspects of it. Next, it is good to have a slide that speaks to your literature. Now, when it comes to your literature, you want to identify your strongest literature. When I say your strongest literature, you're talking about those forms of information that best supports the topic that you're looking at. I would say perhaps 3 to 5. If it is that you are able to have others, but have them in a condensed version, that would be good because you don't want to bombard your audience with a whole heap of information because you don't want to lose them, of course. So when you start out with your strongest literature, it is my hope, that it will pull the attention of those persons. All right. Now, you may also want to make mention of other researchers who would have explored topics in relation to what you are looking at, or perhaps the same content that you are looking at. That way, your audience will have an idea that you have indeed explored a wide range of researchers, right? My third point speaks to reference. Reference. When you're sharing your literature here, it is ideal for you to reference from us. It's only ethical that you're referencing your work. Whoever you pulled something from or borrowed something from, just give credit to where credit is due, in my opinion. All right. The methodology section, again, this part of the presentation, you would have to have a clear understanding of whether or not your paper is of a qualitative nature, a quantitative nature, or of a mixed methods nature. So you need to state explicitly the type of research that is being carried out. The data collection method, of course, will vary depending on the type of paper that you are doing. And so if it is that you're looking at a qualitative paper, you know that, all right, I may think along the lines of doing some document reviews, or if it is that it's a quantitative nature, you may be handing out some sort of questionnaire. When you talk about the mixed methods, on the other hand, you're pulling from both, right? Now, when we talk about sample selection, sample, site, and setting, sorry, that has to do with the qualitative study. But whenever we speak or make mention of sample and link it to population, we are making reference to quantitative as well as the mixed method study. Now, I want to pause there for a bit. For the quantitative nature of the sample, when you identify that particular sample, it is always good for you to note, which body is that sample coming out of, which is where the population aspect comes into play. So let us say, for example, you're looking at a paper that has to do with English educators. English educators would be a part of a bigger group, which is where the population aspect of it would come into play. So these key concepts should be highlighted when you're doing your presentation, particularly under the methodology section. You may dub it another name if you wish to, but I usually dub it as methodology. Next up is in relation to data analysis and presentation. So you have collected your data. It is now time for you to analyze it as well as to present it. But again, remember that we're looking at a 15 minutes to 20 minutes window. And so you're trying to make all of that fit into that time frame. You're trying to share all the necessary information within that time frame. So you are going to have to find creative means of sharing this information. Now, if it is that your paper is of a qualitative nature, we're talking about stuff like coding, categorizing, themes, and assertions. But at the same time, you want to ensure that you're making mention of those key points that will grab the audience. Now, if it's of a quantitative nature, you have an option. It may be of a inferential statistics type, or it may be of a description statistics type. But when we get to that of the mixed methods, as per usual, it's a pull from both areas that makes up the mixed methods aspect of it. Wrapping up, so we have some key points on screen. There's the findings, the recommendations, the conclusion, and the implications. Now, you want to end your presentation with a bang. And so these 4 concepts on screen are absolutely critical. When you are stating your findings, it is always good for you to lead with your strongest finding. You may list perhaps 3 to 4, up to you again, depending on how much you have found out from your study. And of course, you need to ensure that there is some sort of relationship with the findings that you're stating in relation to your research questions. You don't just want to put down your findings, because you need to create a link so that there is a match in relation to what you have found out having asked those or having put forward those research questions. When you get to your conclusion, you need to be clear about your position. What is it that you are putting forward is a final solid point that you want people to leave with. And so you have to be very clear, you have to be very precise, and ensure that you leave that solid point in the back of the minds of everyone who's listening to you. Next is the implications. When we talk about implications, we're talking about what sort of situation will become evident because of something you have found out while executing your study. So if you found out that teachers are going to be heavily implicated because of X, Y, Z, you need to state that. Again, what sort of implications will take place is important, because it will also help to inform the body that you would have been working with, but not only the body, those persons who may look forward to venturing along this particular path in terms of researching what you would have researched. And then we look at the recommendations. You may state about 3 of them, that would be good, but for the recommendations, it's important to note that it is what you are putting forward as a solution. So you have stated the implications. Where's your stance as it relates to how we can solve these problems? That's what you're going to talk about when you get to the recommendations part of it. And then finally, the referencing again comes up. It's very important. We ought to give credit where credit is due. And once again, we're looking at the fact that referencing may be done in various forms. So you're using the reference style according to what is required of you. It may be APA, it may be MLA, or it may be Harvard, depending on which institution you're actually aligned to or working with or executing the study from. Now we move to the aesthetics part of the presentation. When we talk about the aesthetics, this is a very important part of presenting because you want to ensure that whatever you're sharing is reader friendly. And in order for your content to be reader friendly, you want to ensure that you have a theme or color that is suitable. You also want to ensure that the font that you're using is reader friendly, because if the information on screen is not reader friendly, you are going to lose your audience. It is also important for you to be organized. Your content should flow smoothly. It shouldn't be a case where you're moving from slide 2, jump to slide 6, but okay, I missed out slide 4. You want all of the content to flow smoothly so that whoever is taking part in the presentation or listening on your presentation can follow, even if it is that they're unable to hear you, maybe they're able to read as opposed to just listening in. Next up, where you are able to, some persons like this part, some persons don't, it's optional, animation or fancy transition slides. Some persons enjoy adding them, some persons may not, but I believe that it actually does add to the aesthetic appeal of your presentation. And then finally, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Where it is that you can shrink on the word count on a particular slide, it's always good for you to utilize pictures to spark an interest. So we're wrapping up. We're now down to that aspect of delivery. You want to be able to connect with your audience from early. And so how you set the tone from square one will help you in the long run. You also want to deliver with a sense of confidence, but at the same time, you should have a certain level of mastery for the content that you're going to be sharing. With that being said, you have to bear in the back of your mind that it is likely that you are going to get questions on what you would have presented on. And so it is always good for you to read widely in the event that you may have a participant in your room who has a long list of questions in relation to that topic because they just have a heightened interest for that topic. Or it may just be that a lecturer pops in and they want to just hear another perspective. That's always a case when it comes to conference presentations. And so it's always good for you to have confidence when you're executing, but at the same time, have a certain level of mastery of the subject matter that you're sharing on. You also want to try to have a friendly feeling for the audience. You don't want to have a very serious, structured face where persons are scared to ask you questions or scared to add to your presentation. So it's always good to have that friendly sort of feeling going. Now we move to the fact that when you're sharing, you want to get rid of whatever doesn't support your work. So it's basically decluttering. Whatever is not necessary, you're removing it. You want to ensure that you practice or perhaps record yourself ahead of the presentation. That will help you in terms of the delivery. But at the same time, you must remember that you don't want to drown your audience in data. Yes, it is a research conference. Yes, it is that you're presenting everything that you have done or you're planning to do, but there are some persons who may not be able to grasp all of that data that you're throwing at them all at once. And so you want to ensure you're sticking to just the pertinent stuff, just the most important stuff, and get it out there. Finally, you want to try to memorize your intro and your conclusion. You start off solid and you end solid. That will definitely leave a mark. So it's good to try to memorize it. That is basically it for my presentation. I give credit to my lecturers from UWI. I would not have been able to compile this presentation without them. Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Yes, Ruth Ann. So the other room is going on, so you may allow for some questions or comments.
If I may just weigh in here, the other room is actually waiting on you guys, so you can just let us know when you are ready. They have been having conversations, so over to you.
Sorry, I'm actually just scanning through the chat to see if there are any questions. Okay. Now, Mr. Clark, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Ruth Ann, for that. And I see commendations coming in. So if there are no other observations, questions, or comments at this time, I think we can end this breakout room. All right, so we will end the breakout rooms, colleagues, and we will return to the main session. Thank you.